Welcome to today's deep dive. I want you to imagine a country sitting on some of the largest, most unfathomable energy reserves on the planet.
Right, just massive amounts of potential energy.
Exactly. But there's a catch. This country is almost entirely locked out of the global banking system.
Yeah.
So it has the resources, but it can't easily sell them.
Because the traditional financial rails are just closed off.
Yeah. But then, almost like a plot line from some geopolitical thriller, it finds a hidden back door right into the global economy. And that is the reality we are exploring with you today.
It really is a scenario that's forcing a complete reevaluation of how international finance and honestly how economic pressure actually works in the modern era.
Absolutely. So for this deep dive, we are pulling from a really fascinating set of excerpts titled The Strategic Adapter, Iran, Bitcoin, and the Sanctions Pipeline.
It's a great read.
It is. And our mission today is to unpack how a sanctions state uses cryptocurrency, not as some tech novelty, but as a critical geopolitical tool, like a massive, highly complex logistics network.
Which is a huge paradigm shift.
It really is. Now, before we jump into the mechanics of this, I need to make a quick but very important note for you listening. This deep dive touches on some highly politically charged themes.
Yeah, we're getting into some heavy geopolitical territory here.
Right. We are going to be discussing international sanctions, Iranian state actions, and U.S. policies under President Donald J. Trump. So we want to be absolutely clear right up front, we do not endorse any political viewpoints here.
None at all.
Not from the left, not from the right. Our goal is strictly to provide an impartial reporting and analysis of the facts and ideas contained in the provided source material.
Just sticking to the research and the data.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this.
To really grasp the mechanics here, we first have to rethink what a sanction actually does.
Right, because I think most people have a pretty specific idea of what that looks like.
They do. The common perception is that a sanction is a wall, like a hard barrier that just blocks trade from happening.
You can't cross this line.
Exactly, but the reality is far more insidious than that. The source material points out that sanctions don't just block trade, they distort time.
Distort time. That is a strange way to frame an economic policy.
Yeah.
I mean, we usually think of blocked bank accounts and seized yachts, right? Not time travel.
I know, it sounds abstract, but let's walk through it. Say you are a manufacturer in a sanctioned country. You have the money, you've got the factories, and you desperately need a critical component from overseas.
Okay.
In a normal global economy, you'd wire the money through a correspondent bank, which, is essentially a financial institution that provides services on behalf of another. They move money across borders.
Right, they're the middleman making the pipes connect.
Exactly. And normally that transaction clears in a day. The parts ship, everyone. Right, so you are waiting for a foreign bank to clear payment that keeps getting flagged by automated systems. You're waiting weeks for some under-the-radar correspondent bank to finally respond to an email.
Just burning daylight.
Burning daylight and money. You're waiting months for a cargo shipment to secure insurance because major insurers simply won't underwrite the voyage.
So the whole supply chain just freezes.
It freezes. And while you wait in this administrative purgatory, your factory sits idle, your domestic industry stalls, your currency might be rapidly depreciating. Time literally becomes a weapon used against you.
Wow. So you're paralyzed not necessarily by a lack of resources, but by a catastrophic lack of permission to move those resources efficiently.
Yes. And the longer you sit in that waiting room watching your economy bleed out, the more incredibly valuable the concept of instant settlement becomes.
And this is where a decentralized network like Bitcoin enters the picture.
Exactly. It bypasses the waiting room entirely because it produces an asset that does not require permission from any traditional payments network to move from point A to point B.
There is this brilliant analogy in the source material used to explain this psychological shift for state actors.
The two maps.
Yes, the two maps. Imagine an industrialist or a state policymaker looking at two different maps spread out on a table. The first map is the traditional financial world.
The one we all know.
Right, and it's covered in shipping lanes, swift banking rails, sanctions lists, and regulatory choke points. It's essentially a map of locked doors and obstacles.
Everywhere you look, you need a key you don't have.
Exactly. But then they look at the second map. And this is Bitcoin's global settlement layer. Anyone can write to it, anyone can verify it, and most crucially, no single government authority can issue a subpoena or a mandate to turn it off.
Looking at that second map completely changes the calculus of a sanctioned state. It offers the feeling of finding one unlocked door in an entire building full of deadbolts.
But that door isn't free to open.
No, not at all. You have to expend significant energy to walk through it.
Which brings us to a massive engineering workaround. The text highlights the concept of digital energy export.
Right, because Iran struggles to export physical oil efficiently.
Yeah, those traditional supply chains, the physical tankers, the maritime insurance, they've been snapped or severely restricted. But they still have massive amounts of subsidized domestic electricity.
They've got the power, they just can't move the actual oil molecule across a border.
Exactly. So if you cannot export the oil molecule itself, you figure out a way to export the work that the molecule can do.
They are essentially using their energy grid to mine Bitcoin. We often visualize a Bitcoin mine as, I don't know, a tech startup in Silicon Valley printing digital money.
A bunch of computers in a sleek server room.
Right, but in this geopolitical context, it is much more accurate to view it as a refinery.
Let's break that refinery concept down, because I really think that's the key to understanding this whole operation.
Sure, so think about what a traditional oil refinery does. It takes a raw, less usable input, like crude oil, and it converts it into a highly usable refined output, like aviation fuel.
Something that has immediate global utility.
Yes. In this scenario, the raw input is the heavily subsidized domestic electricity, and the output is Bitcoin. The state is refining local energy into a globally priced, borderless commodity-like asset.
And from the state's perspective, transferring a cryptographic key that holds millions of dollars in value across international borders.
Oh, it's infinitely easier than sneaking a physical supertanker full of crude oil past global maritime surveillance.
They are exporting watts, just doing it through code.
Precisely.
But wait, mining the Bitcoin is really only half the battle. I mean, let's say a state-backed entity has successfully refined thousands of Bitcoins. They can't just email a Bitcoin directly to a highly regulated manufacturer in Germany or South Korea and ask them to ship a crate of industrial turbines.
No, they can't, and that is the friction point. Bitcoin is just the base layer. It is the foundation of the value transfer. But to actually make it useful for a national economy, you need a massive, sophisticated machinery sitting above it.
We are talking about a shadow layer.
A huge one. Brokers, over-the-counter trading desks, shell companies, and trade-based laundering networks.
Let's pause on that for a second. For those listening who might only be familiar with buying crypto on a standard retail app, what exactly is an over-the-counter or OTC desk doing in this context?
Good question. So an OTC desk is a private broker that matches buyers and sellers directly. It happens completely outside of public exchanges like Coinbase or Binance.
So it's not visible on a public order book.
Right. In the legitimate financial world, institutional investors use them all the time to buy large amounts of assets without moving the public market price.
Okay, but in this shadow layer.
In this shadow banking layer, an OTC desk acts as an anonymizing bridge. They take the freshly mined Iranian-linked Bitcoin and swap it for stablecoins or reclaim fiat currency or even other commodities.
They are intentionally breaking the visible chain of custody.
Exactly. They wash the asset so it can be used in traditional commerce.
And we aren't just talking about a couple of rogue traders operating out of a basement somewhere. To give you some hard data from the source, the scale here is staggering. In one major enforcement action, the U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC, targeted an Iranian shadow banking network moving massive amounts of value. We are talking about a network associated with $600 million in transactions.
And that is just one network that was caught.
Right. The Chainalysis report mentions multiple public actions targeting facilitators tied to over $100 million in cryptocurrency transfers, often directly connected to the proceeds of Iranian oil sales.
It shows that when a state cannot rely on ordinary banks to handle its national trade, it builds a substitute, a system that mimics banking.
This shadow network handles the credit, the conversion, and the settlement using whatever instruments it can string together.
To make this concrete, let's walk through how this actually looks on the ground. The shadow banking operator acts as a translator.
I love that analogy from the text.
It's perfect because they literally have to be perfectly fluent in two entirely different languages. On one hand, they operate in the physical world. They are dealing with maritime shipping documents, commodity invoices, shell company registrations in places like Dubai or Istanbul, and physical cargo.
Tangible stuff.
Right. But on the other hand, they are managing the digital world, moving funds across crypto wallets, navigating transaction graphs, and utilizing those OTC desks we just talked about. What's fascinating here is the continuous evolutionary loop of this cat-and-mouse game.
How so?
Well, the shadow operator's entire job is to ensure that value changes hands despite the international obstacles. They have to leave just enough ambiguity in the beta trail to survive the next enforcement sweep by Western intelligence.
But those sweeps do happen. I mean,
Oh,
OFAC blacklists, wallets, analytical firms chase the blockchain, networks get busted. So how effective is this really if the ledger is public and authorities are constantly watching?
it acts as an evolutionary pressure. Think of it like a virus. A network scales up, it gets noticed, it gets sanctioned, and it fragments. But it doesn't disappear.
It just adapts.
Exactly. It reforms and scales again using new techniques. With each cycle, the tracing and analytics used by authorities improve, yes, but so do the obfuscation techniques used by the facilitators.
So choke points tighten, but then
Mm.
entirely new corporate structures and digital routes just appear out of nowhere.
Exactly.
But every workaround, no matter how clever the financial plumbing or the digital obfuscation might be, comes with a real-world cost. It has a domestic price tag.
A very heavy one.
And in late 2024, the reporting shows that price tag became incredibly visible and painful
Yeah.
to the average citizen in Iran.
Yes. This is the moment where the highly abstract world of global digital finance crashes violently into physical reality.
Because Bitcoin mining takes power.
A massive, continuous physical load of electricity. It generates intense heat, the cooling fans make deafening noise, and crucially, it creates a massive signature on the national power grid.
You can't hide it.
You really can't. The power grid effectively becomes an unwilling character in this geopolitical story. It is the one thing that simply cannot hide its activity.
I want you to imagine being a citizen in Tehran during this period. It is late 2024. Your apartment goes completely dark.
The rolling blackouts hit.
Right. The rolling blackouts hit, the air conditioning shuts off, and the blistering heat, food is spoiling in your refrigerator. But as you sit in the dark, you know that somewhere on the industrial outskirts of the city, there are warehouse-sized server farms chewing through gigawatts of power.
And those machines just keep humming along.
Exactly.
When that reality sets in, the Bitcoin mine stops being a clever macroeconomic tool for the state. It instantly becomes a highly combustible political symbol.
A monument to corruption.
Yes. It becomes a glaring monument to mismanagement in the eyes of the public. The electrical grid acts as a brutal truth serum here. When citizens are forced to ration basic stability, they inevitably start asking who exactly is getting rich while their lives are plunged into darkness.
But how does the government survive that politically? If you're a state under heavy economic pressure already, are you risking a massive public revolt if you let the grid fail just to mine cryptocurrency?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains the deep contradiction the Iranian state finds itself trapped in.
It's a balancing act.
A very precarious one. On one side of the ledger, mining produces a valuable, permissionless asset that the constrained national economy desperately needs for global procurement.
They need the money.
Right. But on the other side, it triggers severe, potentially destabilizing public backlash. This tension creates a very predictable stop-start rhythm in how the government handles the industry.
It's a fascinating cycle outlined in the sources. First, the state quietly encourages or even legalizes the mining to build up their reserves.
Then the grid strains.
The rolling blackouts hit, the public gets furious, and in response, the state executes a highly publicized clampdown.
Right. You see images on state television of police raiding mining farms, smashing ASIC machines, arresting operators. It's all to show the public that they are saving electricity and cracking down on rogue actors.
But it's largely political theater, isn't it?
It is theater, but it serves a dual purpose. It placates the angry public, sure. But economically, these crackdowns completely reshape the market. They act as a brutal mechanism for market consolidation.
How so?
During these raids, the smaller independent miners, the mom-and-pop operations, or the mid-sized entrepreneurs, they get squeezed out, they have their equipment confiscated, or they are shut down entirely.
While the massive state-backed or politically connected players survive.
Exactly. The actors with the political capital and the deep connections to maintain access to cheap, subsidized electricity weather the enforcement wave.
So it's just waited out.
Yeah, and when the dust settles, the gray market structure has hardened. It leaves the most powerful centralized players in absolute control of the conversion pipeline.
So the domestic pain of the blackouts actually fortifies the system for the biggest players at the top.
It really does.
Let's follow that hardened pipeline to its logical conclusion, though. The ultimate goal for the state isn't just to sit on a mountain of digital tokens. The goal is procurement.
turning that digital code back into physical goods.
Exactly. A mined Bitcoin sitting in a wallet is just potential energy. It only truly matters to the state when it is translated back into physical trade settlement.
And that could be anything. A shipment of medicine, a specialized industrial turbine part, or increasingly, dual-use technology and military components.
And the stakes on that procurement are incredibly high. The source cites early 2026 reporting indicating that Iran was offering defense exports in exchange for cryptocurrency payments.
That represents the pipeline reaching its most strategically sensitive, mature form.
It's moved way beyond just bypassing simple trade hurdles.
Right. It demonstrates how Bitcoin has evolved into a fully fledged procurement language. It acts as the settlement glue connecting buyers, illicit intermediaries, and willing suppliers across different, often competing, global jurisdictions.
A financial language.
Yes, and it's useful precisely because it can be spoken quietly in places where traditional Western-dominated banks simply refuse to operate or translate.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. There is a massive, almost ironic paradox here involving U.S. policy. The text refers to it as the American echo.
It is a delicate point, but absolutely crucial for understanding the second-order effects of global markets.
Walk us through it.
The core dynamic is this. If Iranian-linked actors are mining and accumulating Bitcoin to build a strategic reserve that resists sanction,
Which we've established they are.
right, then anything that happens globally to increase Bitcoin's price, its liquidity, or its mainstream legitimacy inadvertently increases the purchasing power of those sanctioned holdings.
Wow. So what you're saying is, without any deliberate intent to fund an adversary, the global market mechanics do it indirectly.
Yes. There is no conspiracy or deliberate coordination here. It is just the cold reality of a globally decentralized asset. When highly regulated U.S. markets deepen their integration with Bitcoin, whether that's through massive institutional adoption, ETF approvals, or favorable regulatory frameworks, the asset becomes easier to hold and trade at scale.
It's treated less like a speculative tech project and more like a standard, globally recognized financial instrument.
Exactly.
And the text highlights a highly specific, massive catalyst for this validation. In March 2025, a White House fact sheet detailed President Donald J. Trump establishing a strategic Bitcoin reserve for the United States government.
This raises an important question. What happens to the global game theory when the world's most powerful financial state signals that an asset is strategically critical?
It changes everything.
It does, even if that policy is strictly aimed at domestic U.S. economic objectives or meant to secure American financial dominance globally. It acts as a massive amplifier of legitimacy.
It's a giant green light.
Right. It signals to global markets and to potential trading partners of sanctioned states that Bitcoin is durable, it is liquid, and it is a sovereign-level asset.
So we end up looking at this incredible geopolitical paradox. On one hand, Washington is actively deploying its intelligence and financial enforcement arms like OFAC to tighten the screws on Tehran, hunting down those shadow banking facilitators and seizing wallets.
Doing everything they can to stop the flow.
Right. But on the other hand, Washington's own domestic policy moves are making the very asset Tehran is holding more valuable, more liquid, and easier to use in the shadows.
The U.S. policy inadvertently strengthens Tehran's purchasing power.
That is wild.
It perfectly illustrates the profound limits of traditional economic statecraft when dealing with a decentralized, borderless network. The price, the liquidity, and the fundamental protocol at the network simply do not care about international politics.
They don't care about sanctions designations or bilateral conflicts.
Not at all. The network just processes the next block.
So what does this all mean? Why should you care about the minutia of shadow banking, OTC desks, and rolling blackouts halfway across the world? Because we are witnessing a fundamental rewrite of how global power, energy, and finance intersect.
It's a completely new landscape.
It is. It proves that in a highly connected digital world, financial systems are ultimately like water. No matter how many dams you build or how many regulatory walls you construct, the water will inevitably find a crack to flow through.
To synthesize what we've covered today, we've looked at how a sanctioned state weaponizes its own subsidized energy to convert physical watts into a borderless digital asset. We've traced the complex shadow banking machinery required to translate that code into physical procurement.
The translators.
Right. We've seen the heavy domestic toll this takes, turning the electrical grid into a political battleground. And finally, we explored the paradox of the American echo, where the pursuit of financial legitimacy in the West inadvertently hands increased procurement power to a sanctioned adversary.
It is a massive shift in how the world operates. And it is undeniably the new frontier of modern geopolitics. To leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over on your own, if sovereign superpower states and heavily sanctioned actors are both increasingly relying on the exact same decentralized network for their strategic financial reserves, what happens to the traditional concept of economic warfare?
It's a great question.
If the ultimate financial weapon turns out to be strict, unyielding mathematical neutrality, who really holds the power in the decades to come? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope it gave you a new lens to view the shifting global economy. Keep questioning the narratives behind the news, and we'll catch you next time.